So one last session before lunch. So coming up will be why winning brands prioritize customer understanding and how you can get started today and how you can start today. Rita Jhaveri, CEO of CX Growth Advisors. Help me welcome her to the stage.
You got a clicker for me?
I do, in my pocket.
All right, thank you. Okay, excellent. So before we get started, I was gonna ask everyone to stand up and wiggle their arms and put their arms in the air, because I know we've been sitting for a couple of hours. Yeah, awesome, yay! We're almost there at the end of the line. All right, now, sit down. All right, so my name is Rita Jhaveri. I'm CEO of CX Growth Advisors. We're a boutique consulting company, started about a year ago. We focus on helping our customers monetize their experience. A lot of what you're gonna hear, Stephanie and Deepta talked about, and they're doing it in real time, in action. So myself, Rita, I've worked in B2B SaaS for 25 years. I've worked in customer support, customer success, sales, and marketing. I started at Salesforce in 2000. I was employee 127. And little did I know that I was boarding a rocket ship. It was pretty amazing. I ended up staying for 18 years, had 3 kids. They're all in college. I'm a dog mom, married 27 years. And it's been pretty incredible. But today, I'm super excited to talk about how experience is the new growth engine, right? We talk about sales-led growth, product-led growth. What about experience-led growth, right? That's the new thing. By the end of this session, you'll understand why CX often struggles. We've been talking about it kind of the last 2 days, right? That CX it's hard to monetize. What's the ROI of CX? We're being pushed aside, right, into the corner. Well, we're gonna talk about why that's happening, and more importantly, what you can do about it. How can you change the narrative? And we'll talk about what you really need to be measuring and monetizing with the customer journey. We're gonna talk about sometimes it fails. Why is it failing? And what can we do to change that? But as the experts, we're gonna bring some insights. We're gonna give you some examples of experience that we've seen with our clients and what we've done by scaling businesses at Salesforce and Elastic and other companies that we've worked at from zero, actually Salesforce was pre-zero when I joined, to billions, okay? So at the end of this session, I promise you that you're gonna get some great ideas that you can take back to your team and to your company. So, I have a little story. One of my vendor contracts recently expired in April, and I wanted to renew the contract. So what did I do? I went online, I went to their website, I went into their portal, and I tried to renew the contract. And I realized that when I was talking to the chat, it was a bot, it was a robot, it wasn't a real person. I spent about, I think, 2.5 hours, almost 3 hours trying to figure it out, and then I gave up. I just said, you know what, screw this, I don't want this anymore. It's just wasting my time. So I have too many things to do. So I want to ask y'all, how many of you are experiencing this right now? Like where you get online and you're talking to a bot and you really end up nowhere, right? It's pretty frustrating. So I know that people think that AI can do anything, right? And one day it will. However, at the moment, I think it's really making us frustrated, right? And we're trying to figure it out. There's a lot of change happening right now, but we're creating this infinite loop of madness right now for people. And I have a few short stories that I'm gonna talk about here in a minute. So what we're learning is that companies that are driving a poor experience really aren't winning. So how many of you have Sonos or have heard of Sonos? It's like a little streaming box device that you have at home. I've had it for about 20 years. Recently, my kids started complaining, Mom, Sonos isn't working. What's wrong? What did you do? Because I'm supposedly the IT expert in my household because I worked at Salesforce, not. So, I realized I went online and I'm trying to do some searching of like what's happening with Sonos. And I realized the community is really not happy with it. There were a lot of issues. They put an upgrade out there, and guess what? It caused latency. It started going down. And that experience actually cost the business a lot of money. And they let go of their CEO. So, I mean, this is a real-life example of a customer experience gone bad, right? And how it affected the revenue of the company. So that's one example. How many of you know CrowdStrike? Raise your hand. Some of you may have gotten stuck somewhere, dealt with some of these issues that, with the CrowdStrike outage. So CrowdStrike is a security software. It's supposed to keep the bad guys out of the network, right? I mean, it takes like years to build trust, and they're in the security space. Years to build trust, but in minutes, they lost that trust, right? So they did the upgrade. They put it out in the world. They didn't properly test it. I mean, I've been doing a ton of research on CrowdStrike. I'm from Austin. They're in Austin. I have friends that work there. Wow. I mean, they pushed the software out, and essentially what happened is that there was a very specific operating system with a very specific version of their software and a very specific kernel that stopped working. I mean, it affected banks, it affected hospitals. My husband's practice was down, his hospitals were down. I mean, it affected so many people. Airlines, I mean, if you were traveling during that time on Delta, 5 days they had to cancel all their flights, right? I mean, what a catastrophe. So it's not only impacting the customer, the user of CrowdStrike, but then it's affecting the customers of CrowdStrike, and then the partners of CrowdStrike, and then the customers of the customer, right? And the employees, man, they're not happy either because they're having to deal with all the issues. So once again, the takeaway here is that a poor product experience impacts a lot of people. And with social media, wow, it's a force multiplier when, people are having these poor experiences. So let's talk about this current directive. I mean, that's all we seem to be talking about, right, is AI. AI, AI, AI. I mean, it's like E-I-E-I-O. That's all we're talking about. I'm sure many of you are hearing, we need more AI. That's all I hear from my friends that work at tech companies. San Francisco, I go there a lot. Every billboard is an AI advertisement for some company. It's crazy. I get it. AI will and can do a lot, but we're in the middle of this disruption, as I talked about, right? The shift is happening. It's like happening right now as we speak. And we're starting to see companies make this shift. So, what are they saying? We need to reduce the cost to serve. We need to spend less. We did it to ourselves. I mean, I was at Salesforce for so long. I saw how it grew. We went from having sales to customer support to customer success. When I left in 2018, we had 7,000 people in customer success. Boy, were our customers confused. I was one of the first CSMs. I didn't do that, though. I really didn't do it to the customers. There's companies like Shopify, Uber, Google. They're all making this shift. I mean, they're making these very, very big shifts in the organization, and it's coming from the top down. Everybody has to learn AI, or you're out, right? And I'm that generation that's like, what, I got to open the book back up and learn? Oh my gosh, my kids are in college. I didn't know I'd have to do this, but I'm doing it. I'm taking a course on AI and analytics. So we all need to kind of jump in and do that, right? But it's not easy. So my question to y'all is, how is AI going to work if your customer data is siloed, right? I mean, I felt it. I experienced this. I kind of know what's going on in the back end of that vendor. I want to go help them, but they have to help themselves fix this problem. And this is leading to a very fragmented experience for the customer. You're building for failure. We hear this. We're hearing this over and over. You're building for failure because you don't know how to measure for success, right? There's not one owner for the customer experience. And typically, as CX professionals, we've owned these metrics. Again, we keep talking about it, NPS, CSAT, effort score. But more often than not, these aren't tied back to the business. I come from the business. I used to ask my CX people, I'm like, but why does that matter? That's a moment in time, NPS. How do we measure that in terms of the customer's retention, their renewal? So we've got to change. We've got to try new things. We've got to be different. One of our clients, which is a Fortune 1000 company, they asked us to map their journey. I laughed because I was like, well, can't ChatGPT do that? I mean, like, really need us to do that? But we did it. We mapped everything from their clients coming to their website all the way through to using the product, right? And we tracked every engagement along the way. We documented every little thing. I think Stephanie was talking about this earlier. You've got to understand every touch point, and you've got to find ways to understand what happens. Are they using? Are they leaving? Are they growing? What are they doing at every step of the journey? I'll talk more about this later. But what we did discover is that there was a huge disconnect across all of their teams. I mean, again, I worked at Salesforce. I saw it grow. I saw the disconnect that was happening as it got bigger and bigger and bigger. Customer teams are assuming, and at this particular client, they assume the customer's happy. I mean, the CSAT scores were really high. Yeah, of course, yay, they're happy. But when you speak to a customer, they're not so happy. They're giving a 1.1 score, right? And this is Trustpilot. Everyone sees this. Thank you, social media. So customer teams, they've got to change, right? We've got to think about how to be future ready and create a self-serve experience. Now, what we did for our client is we did that. We designed a future-ready state, a self-serve agentic experience that could measure the ROI of those engagements. And by integrating the data and the measurement practices into every step of what we're calling experience-led growth design, we didn't just create these solutions, these innovative solutions, we made sure that they were measurable so that they could track business outcomes within the journey. It wasn't just a journey, a nice thing on a piece of paper, it was measurable. And they aligned this to the leadership priorities. But even with all that, they continue to have challenges because every team views the data a little differently. How many of you experienced this in your company where you've got all this data and one team looks at it like this and another team is looking at it like that? Raise your hand if you experienced this. Yeah, it's pretty bad, right? I mean, when that happens, it's like, well, okay, what do we focus on? How do we prioritize where we should start with the experience? We've got to go back to that first team mentality. But there's also, at this company, unclear ownership, as we talked about. The data's all over the place. There's no centralization of the data, but nobody owns it. Nobody owns the customer experience singularly. And so what does that do? It makes accountability really hard. Who do I talk to? Who's going to help me? How do I get this fixed? And then it makes the follow-through really long, right? So decisions are also being focused at this particular client of ours on reducing cost to serve. So they want to reduce cost to serve, but they want to maintain experience. They want to make it better, right? And that's becoming really challenging. And for the company, guess what? I don't know if y'all have ever seen this slide. It's my favorite. Leaky bucket. They're losing customers. Now, this seems to be a really big trend also across the industry, right? We're losing our customers. But we have to go find more customers, and we're losing. I mean, it's just like, when does it end? So this trend is just, it's never ending, right? But we also have multiple uncontrollable factors that are coming into play besides the business, right? There's a lot of stuff happening in the world right now. I want to ask you all a question. So I'm assuming you guys have some churn in your business. How many of you actually understand where the leaks are coming from? Does anyone raise your hand if you know why your customers leave? Oh my gosh, really? Wow. Right. So, but before I dive into the AI stuff, I wanted to kind of talk about what's happening, right? Companies are starting to look through their organization. They're reviewing everything, and they're changing a lot of things. They're changing the operating model. They're realizing that there's a lot of optimization of the data that needs to be had, data reconciliation, data organization. I mean, they've got to get ahead of the data, right? Because the information is scattered all over the organization, from, finance to the customer teams to, legal. It's just everywhere. This is all customer data. And yet there's issues are still not being resolved. Again, it goes back to ownership. There's no singular owner. And if you look from the outside in, right, as a customer, serving the customers, it's a complete mess. It's a disaster. They're confused. They don't know how to get answers. And customer obsession, I mean, is anyone obsessed about customers anymore? It doesn't seem that way, right? We kind of forgot about that. And how many of you, sorry, I have a lot of questions for y'all today. How many of you have a single definition of what a customer, of a customer across every system, right? Having a consistent, this is our customer data dictionary. Does anyone have that within their organization? No, right? It's challenging. Okay, now we're going to layer on AI. What's going to happen next? It's going to create more of a mess, right? You like the little lady in the middle? That's who you're talking to in the bot. From my personal experience with my vendor that I was trying to get in touch with, if thousands of people had the same experience I did, half of them will probably not renew. So now it's impacting revenue, right? Right? But customer experience, it's not new. It's been around, actually a pretty long time, decades. And over the years, as consumerism has sort of picked up, and we started focusing on customer value, then CX got really important. And then NPS was born in about mid-2000s. I remember when we started that program at Salesforce. It was a really fascinating program, because the person who created the program did these surveys, right? And everything was in Salesforce in the system. And it was all automated. And she had this requirement that you had to respond to the customer in 24 hours by phone, right? We did some things right back then. But, then the customer journey came to life. But, I think CX is evolving. We're not done yet. We're just getting started. So McKinsey, who you all know, they reported that personalized experiences drive growth. It's not just about Net Promoter Score. How many of y'all use products like Canva or Monday.com? They're pretty easy to use, right? They're really focused on the customer experience. I love it. I mean, I can go into these tools and use it without reading a book. I love these types of products. They're so easy. But when the customers don't get it right and don't get what they need, it's really hard, right? They're going to go somewhere else. And it takes a lot more work for the business to get new customers than it is to keep their existing customers. So really, what companies need to do is focus on unlocking the value with the existing customers. That's really what needs to happen. It takes a lot of work and money and time to acquire a customer. Now love them, help them, make sure they're getting answers. Don't just throw a bot in front of them and never answer their question. And as CX professionals, you need to become strategic. I mean, this is kind of the takeaway that I'm hearing today. You got to dig into the business. You need to understand why churn is happening. I mean, I lived in those teams where I owned a number, I owned a retention number, and I always had to get in and understand, like, what's going on? And more often than not, it was something out of my control. It was the product or something else, right? You need to have an understanding of the business as a CX professional. You need to understand all the processes, all the systems, all of the inner workings of how things work or not work, and how that's impacting the customer experience. And then from a culture standpoint, I think it's really super important to understand the employees and their experience. When I was at Elasticsearch, I was leading customer success, and I was responsible for this. It was this customer experience transformation program. It came from the top down. And one of the things we did was we were collecting insights on customer experience, like why are they leaving? What's going on? What do we need to do? But one of the things that we did was do an employee survey. And what's interesting is that the employee survey insights and the customer insights, they matched. They knew. They knew what was going on. They understood why customers were leaving. Why aren't we listening to our employees? It's fascinating. So change is not coming. It's here. It's here. It's here, right now. So the question is, are you ready? Are you ready for the change? So for the last 2 years, CX Growth Advisors, we have been witnessing this sort of evolution, right, of CX. And, you know, what we learned is that we're being forced to think differently. And this is coming from McKinsey as well. They're saying that we have to partner with all the teams to understand the holistic approach of your customer. You can't think singularly, team by team, where the sales team works separately, the CS team works separately, the customer experience team is over there, marketing's over there. You've got to be one team, a united front, right? That first team mentality. And those companies that follow this approach, we're calling it experience-led growth approach, okay? That's the new way, experience-led growth. If you follow this approach, you'll win. You'll grow. So what they're saying is you have to be bold. You've got to reimagine the way you work, the way you think, your culture. You got to reimagine the operational stuff that you're having to do. There's so many things that you've got to analyze, inspect and analyze and change. I know these are not necessarily our decisions to make, but we can influence these decisions as CX professionals, right? And we've got to find a way to monetize what we do. Take that journey, monetize it, understand it, find out where the gaps are in the journey. Understand how it's impacting revenue, churn, right? And if you can start to do that, then I think people may start to listen and understand that, hey, you've got something here. The CX team is onto something. Companies that follow this approach, they're going to experience growth, and it's been proven. They're going to grow 2 times faster, and there's going to be 2.5 times greater market share. And then they're going to realize that 80% of the value is coming from their core customers. So to drive experience-led growth, you really have to improve the engagement. You've got to improve satisfaction. You've got to look at the retention. You've got to start with connected, measurable, and actionable data. Let me repeat. It has to be actionable. How many of you have like all this data and you're like, I don't know what to do with it? Like, it's there, but I don't know what it's telling me. right? You've got to make sure you understand it, make it actionable. You've got to also track engagement quality, whether it's a human or a bot. I was really upset that I never got a phone call from that experience that I had. As a matter of fact, when I was chatting with the bot, I was like, can you please have somebody call me? Never happened. And then as you develop the agents, you've got to make sure they're working in harmony. We've talked about this a little bit over the last few days, right, with how agentic experiences are going to take shape. So you've got to ask yourself these questions. Do you know your customers? Do you know who they are? Do you know what they're doing? Are they even logging into your product or using your service? If so, how much? Right? You got to ask yourself these questions. You got to go find the answers. And do you know how they feel? I mean, does the bot know how I feel? I don't know. Maybe one day it'll know. Right now, I don't think so. So historically, we've operated in these silos, right? Each team is using their own system, their own tools, and they track their own KPIs, right? Again, I come from the sales side where it's like, well, that's not my job. I don't sell. Or that's not my job. I don't do retention. Everyone's kind of in their own lane. But the KPIs haven't evolved. They're measured in isolated moments, which is not helpful. NPS is like a moment in time. It's not enough. Some of the examples that I dealt with when I was in the business side was like quote to cash. That's sales. Time to onboard. Sometimes it was product, sometimes it was CSM. We were confused. Who owns this, right? Then there's first call resolution, which was support, and then NPS, and then net expansion rate. Who owns that, sales or CS? We're confused. So we've got to look at it together, not singularly, right? We've got to all kind of have some stake in this, skin in the game. So what do they have in common? Like I said, they're function specific. Each team should serve the customer holistically and together. We've got to go back to the first team mindset. So my promise to you was to provide you with some actionable takeaways, right, that you can take back to your team to drive change. First, you've got to start by connecting the data teams. Maybe you don't know who they are. Go find them. Become friends with them. Take them out for a coffee, virtual coffee. I don't know. Just find them. Then integrate them at the customer level to build a unified data framework. I mean, you know, we talked about how data is everywhere. We got to figure out how to bring it together. And you don't want IT to take over, right? I mean, somebody told me that, you know, IT is starting to kind of take the customer experience. No, you don't want that. They can help you with the data, but what they can't do is help you with the insights to make sense of the insights, right? So work with them, understand them, and have them understand you and what you know. Build a real-time customer 360 view. I mean, in order to have that, you've got to have really good data, right? You need to understand what is your customer doing. That 360 view should align to your journey, that measurable journey. And then you're going to find gaps in that journey, right? Gaps where there's leakage, revenue loss. And then you're able to measure, right? Where are we losing? Where are we winning? What can we do better? The data structure that you create has to be something where you're continuously learning from it. Don't just create it and leave. You've got to build. You've got to learn. It takes time. That's why I have listen, resolve, learn, repeat here on this slide. It's about like learning and then doing, understanding, doing it again. You know, for the marketers in the room, you do A/B testing. We in the business need to learn from you and A/B test things. We've got to do it across the business. Help us. Raise your hand if you guys are doing experimentation in your company where you do some testing with the data, and awesome, that's great. So this is an example of a canvas that we built for our client. It's what we're calling the experience-led growth canvas. It's an end-to-end view of the business. So as you look at this canvas, you're going to see that it's following the journey in some ways, right? From product experience, user experience, there's revenue there, there's time to onboarding on there as well, right? And the reason why we put time to onboarding close to revenue is because the faster they onboard, the faster they grow, right? And if they're not onboarding, there's a problem. So this type of dashboard is really, really helpful for executives. You've got to get it in front of an executive, and they need to bring it to their executive meetings, because that's where they can talk about where the problems are. I mean, I'm so used to, at Salesforce, there was always the revenue dashboard. No, that's the past. You need to have a holistic dashboard. They need to understand the business. What is going on in the business? And it needs to follow, they don't understand journey. We need to help them understand journey, right? And it needs to follow the journey. Does this make sense to y'all? Yes? Raise hands. Yeah, maybe. But as I said, the data here correlates with the journey. And the KPIs that are here helps you understand where the leakage is happening. So as consumers, we're feeling the experience, right? And as leaders, we're watching the chaos. And we're trying to figure out what do we do? How do we do it? What do we need to change? And if you want to drive a better experience that leads to growth and avoid like issues and leaky bucket and retention problems and all that stuff that you just don't want to do, and also be ready for AI in the process, then you do need to do 3 things, okay? The first one is you've got to get visibility and access. There's going to be things that you don't have access to. You got to go ask for it. You got to speak up. I need access to these systems, these teams, to be able to talk to people. And you've got to figure out how you're going to identify that, right? Step 2, you've got to engage stakeholders. Go find a champion. Have a coffee with them, right? Figure out who that is. Have a coffee with them. Reach out to them over Slack or whatever. See if they'll get time with you. And then determine how you're going to secure that stakeholder to help you. It's not easy, but it can be done. I've done it. And step 3, secure alignment. Without alignment and then sign off, your project isn't really going to go anywhere, right? You need that sponsor. You need that advocate that also believes in what you're believing in. And if they believe in it and they see the difference, and Stephanie talked about this earlier, right? She said her CEO is their biggest advocate. Okay, maybe not your CEO, but somebody that has influence, right? Define your path of what you need to do, how you're going to do it, your roadmap, right? And then go do it, execute. So what I'm asking you all to do is to avoid that service experience I had at the very start of this, right? I mean, just please, don't do that. And if you need help with any of this, just come find me. That's it. That's what I got for you.